In this video, we're going to take a look at the new Mocha-powered parameter tracking available to you in Final Cut Pro VIA Continuum 2023.5. So you might have been familiar with our product Continuum FCP and how it allows Mocha masking with all of our effects. Now enter parameter tracking that is now available in 15 effects, which will allow you to either corner pin an effect or point track it into a scene. The magic of this is that it's powered by Mocha, so we can do things such as offset tracking, which we're just not capable of with just the host itself. To see this as an example, I've got a couple clips prepared in my timeline to show you the parameter-based track, and in another movie, I'll show you how we can use this for corner pinning as well. All right, what I'd like to do is add some chroma bands to the shot and have them pinned to the stereo. I'll escape out of here. And one thing to note is before you even add an effect and want to use parameter tracking is we need to take an initial step inside the timeline. So with this clip selected, trimmed or untrimmed, I'm going to choose to create a new compound clip, which I'll call parameter track. And we're doing this to make sure that the data is going to carry over appropriately. I've already done a search under all for chroma, and I'll just apply the chroma bands effect and just move to the beginning of the timeline. What I'd like to do is make the position center of the chroma bands. I'll use the on-screen controls, so it's just right over the stereo. And in the inspector, let me come over here and make a few changes by increasing the chroma. I will change the angle to -90. I'll also increase the scale a bit here. Now, in order to track this to our scene, all you're going to do is click on the Mocha parameter tracking button. Enter Mocha, and we can already see in the middle of the view that we have one little setup here for the position of where we want our element, and then the position search area. It's this separation of data that makes Mocha extremely powerful and allows us to track things off screen. In this case, everything is on screen. I'm just going to move to the beginning of the timeline. And I'd like to increase the position search area, keeping in mind I'm going to place it over the stereo here. And I'll put the position for the time being just over the cassette player. Now, before I begin to track this, I'm just going to play a little bit forward. And we want to be able to avoid those reflections because they're non-coplanar. So its movement has a different relationship to the camera than what we're actually going to be tracking. So I'm going to decrease the size of that search area. Since there's only position, scale, and rotation, I'm good to go here. And I'm going to track this forward. So we can see here that the circle, the track area, is about to go off screen. But because we've made that area so large, indeed, it does keep up and hold up with the track the entire time. Now that the track is at the end here, I'm just going to press the play backward button. And that position data looks good. If we close out of Mocha and just press the save button, we'll be able to see the results in the Final Cut Pro timeline. So let's make a full screen playback. And indeed, those chroma bands are now attached to the stereo. I can see that they're not rotating though with the stereo. So let's just add a few keyframes to bring this even more to life. And with my skimmer, just find the place where she's about to start to rotate the stereo herself, which is just around the 1 second and 12 frame mark. Here in the inspector, let's go to the angle and add a keyframe. And then I'm going to find the arc of where she tilts up this stereo the most, which is quite a bit down at 4 seconds and 8 frames. And I'll now adjust the angle so that the chroma bands tilt in that direction. Going back into my timeline and making another full screen playback, we now have the effect that we're looking for. The magic of this parameter tracking data is I can continue to make changes to the chroma bands without ever having to track this again. Now, before we take off, let's take a look at another example using parameter-based tracking with lens flares. All right, I'm inside of a new project. And let's just go to the beginning of the clip where I'll do a full screen playback. We'd like to place a lens flare or sun element in the top right-hand corner of this shot. The only problem is there's not a lot of contrast or detail in the upper right-hand corner. All of the pixels are the same. This is where Mocha can shine. Press Escape to get out of here. We'll go to the BCC Lights category, and that's where we're going to find lens flares. Let's apply it to the clip, and we'll get the first default lens flare. But rest assured that if you go inside the effects editor from the inspector, on the left-hand side, several lens flares for you to choose from. I'm going to choose the lens flare resolve, and we can play around where this position of the lens flare is going to show up. We can also control in the parameters on the right-hand side the overall strength of the lens flare, making it stronger, even giving it a slightly different color. Let's go with orange here. If we're looking to change the individual components of the lens flare, look no further than clicking on the Edit Flare button. On the left, you'll see those elements, which we can turn on and off with the lightning icon. We could also add additional elements here at the bottom. So in this case, I'll scroll down. I'll actually add some chroma bands. And in the parameters list of the selected chroma bands, I will have this offset on the x-axis. You should have seen it appear in the middle of the frame. I can increase its brightness, and then I can change where I want this to be positioned. I'll bring down the brightness now that I've seen it, as well as play with its angle. Once done, just press the Apply button at the bottom of the editor, and let's go Apply to go back inside of Final Cut. Now, in order to get this tracked into our scene, let's click on that Mocha Parameter Track button at the top of this effect, and we can see here that it's already holding onto the position and the position search area. Well, once again, this isn't a lot of data for us to track. So instead, we're going to offset this. I'm actually going to grab this position search area and find something that has a lot of texture in it, and also roughly the same plane in where the lens flare is going to reside. The top of this building is looking great. I'll make sure that I have a fairly large search area here to get quite a bit of texture, as well as that little hole in the middle of the roof. And once that's set up, I'll head over here to the Essential tab, just taking a note that we're tracking translation, scale, and rotation. I'll also track skew in the motion of this shot. And now, since I'm on the last frame of this clip, let's click the button to track backwards. As you can see, this is tracking pretty well, and you've got a separate search area compared to the position of where the lens flare is going to be, which just makes this ideal for offset tracking. Okay, let's just play this back and kind of take a look at the position search area. I can see there that it holds up pretty well. And to see how this looks in the host, I'm going to close out of Mocha. We're now back in Final Cut, and I'll give this a full screen playback to see that lens flare tracked to our scene. Now, in order to integrate this a bit better, I'm going to use some lens flare controls to our advantage. Closer to the bottom of the effect, I'm going to increase the speed of the flicker to 1000 and make that amount smaller. So now we have a little bit of some flickering light there with our lens flare. 10 is too strong, so I'll even set the amount value to 2, but still allowing for a very high-paced flicker. Also want there to be some changes in the lens flare as it hits the edges of the frame. And under edge flare, I'll set the amount to be a little bit greater and the size here as well. And if I go back to the beginning of the project and do a full screen playback, allow for a change in the size of our lens flare if it moved away from that edge. Now, last but not least, if I turn off the lens flare here in the inspector and scrub further down into my timeline, we have these wires, and it would be nice for the actual sun to appear behind those wires, but still very bright. So in order to deal with that, I'm going to make a duplicate copy of my clip by option clicking here in the timeline. And I'm going to scrub to the part just before we see the wire and select the clip and press option left square bracket in order to trim it to this point. With this duplicate copy, I'm going to go down into the effect to the crop settings. After trimming, first of all, I'm going to get rid of the lens flare effect on the top here, and I'm going to turn off the clip on the bottom where I can now see the crop settings that I'll apply to this shot, where I'll drag the left and bottom sliders just to isolate the wire in the top portion here. Now I can use a built-in Final Cut Pro effect called Luma Key under the keying category in order to remove these wires. So I'll head to the mask and keying category. There's my Luma keyer. Apply it to the top clip. And first of all, in the inspector, invert the option where I'll now drag down the white slider to isolate the wires, just so that you can see this clearer. I'll move a little bit further down into the timeline and then go under the matte tools. I'll shrink this matte a little bit so that we can see them a bit clearer. Now let's turn on the bottom clip, and I also turn off the lens flare, so I'm going to turn that on as well. And we should now be able to see these behind these wires, not to mention flickering. This is just scratching the surface of what's possible with parameter-based tracking powered by Mocha using Continuum 2023.5 inside of Final Cut Pro. In the next couple of videos, I'm going to be covering how we can also do this with corner pinning, something that has not been available with Final Cut. For more tips and tricks just like this, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page, not to mention to follow us at borisfx.com for the latest and greatest information on all of our products.